Hey ladies, got a struggle? Need to vent? It's time to join your voice and get down to business with some critical thought, where like-minded ladies share their personal experiences to empower each other, using critical thinking to make wise decisions. And now, here's your host, Lady C.
This is Lady C coming at you with another episode of The Struggles of Jehovah's Witness Women. My next guest is very interesting. Many of you have no doubt seen some of her videos that she has produced with her husband, and they have a lot of great information to share. Both she and her husband come from a long line of dedicated Jehovah's Witnesses. They were considered pillars in the circuit because both of their fathers were elders in their congregations. Everywhere they went, people knew who they were. So you can imagine when they severed ties with the organization, how it was hard for them because they were literally cut off from all their friends and their families. So my upcoming guest is going to share all of her experiences with you, and I'd like to welcome Robin from What's Up, Watchtower. So thank you so much, Robin, for being on the show, and I'm glad you're here to share your story with our audience.
Thank you, Lady C, for having me on. It's such an honor and pleasure to be on your show.
And thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your story. But before we get started talking about your story, I'm interested in finding out how you came up with the name of your YouTube channel, What's Up Watchtower.
Well, I have to give all the credit to Mike. He was setting up our YouTube page, and we've gone back and forth with several names, and I was at work, and I said, well, what are you going to name it? He says, I don't know, I'll come up with something. And then he texted me a few minutes later, and he said, it's What's Up Watchtower. And I just busted out laughing. I said, that's perfect.
So you didn't have no problem with that, huh?
Nope.
So Mike has creativity as well. What's Up Watchtower? I like that. It has like a little ring to it. So, Robin, let's talk about you and your family first. Let's just talk about how you and your family became Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, my father was raised sort of around the witnesses. His father was baptized, although he wasn't very active. But my father did not become a witness until after he married my mother, and they began studying in the late 60s. And then they were baptized prior to my being born.
Okay, so you're actually a born-in. How many siblings do you have?
I have one brother and one sister.
Where do you fall in this age group?
I am the baby. I am the baby of the family.
Okay. Now, of all of your siblings, did everybody become baptized witnesses?
Yes, my brother and sister, well, they did get baptized and are still active witnesses.
And now that you are no longer going to the Kingdom Hall, what is your relationship like with your family?
Well, we started fading over the past 10 years, and the relationship was maintained, though a little strained. But since we started our YouTube channel, and when it was discovered about 6 weeks after we put up our first video, since that point on, they've been shunning us.
Okay. Well, who let the cat out of the bag?
We have no idea. All we were told was that someone from our area saw it, that knew who we were, and contacted my husband's father, who is still an elder living in Georgia, and then he promptly contacted my father.
Wow. So that must have been really a shocker for you guys.
Definitely. We didn't expect it would only take 6 weeks.
So somebody's out there. Are you friends with anybody on Facebook that are Jehovah's Witnesses before you went online?
I had a couple of witness friends, but we kept very anonymous and never promoted it through our Facebook page or any other ways that could have been linked back to us. So our first video was getting a lot of hits. In fact, even at this point, it's only been 4 months and it has over 25,000 views. Mm-hmm. So whenever you would, in the search bar in YouTube, type in Jehovah's Witnesses, at that time, we were on the first page that came up. So then we were like, oh boy, a lot of people might be seeing this that actually know us because we're coming up on the first page when you search Jehovah's Witnesses on YouTube. So that's probably how it happened.
Mm-hmm. Now, because you said that you were fading, so like when you put your YouTube channel up, you all had already been out of the organization for 10 years or pretty much faded. So
yes, we had not been to a meeting in 10 years.
So you really weren't hanging around any of your old Watchtower friends, though, right?
Not a single one.
Okay. So then you really had already pretty much cut ties and had started living a different life outside of the organization.
Yes, and there were a couple of people that I had grown up with who had sent me friend requests on Facebook. So those people, were on Facebook, but they wouldn't have known what we were doing because I never even talked to them. They don't even live in my area, I don't think. But I had one friend, but she lives, again, in Kentucky, out of the area, and she's never on Facebook, so she would not have known about any of this.
Because, the biggest problem that people have when they leave the organization is they don't have friends outside of the organization, so they have a hard time getting back into a normal life. And since you guys had already been gone for 10 years, what type of friends had you started to make after you left the organization?
Yeah, that's a great point, because when I stopped going to meetings, I had no non-witness friends other than one person who I had been friends with for quite some time, but our schedules were such that we rarely saw each other. We might have seen each other maybe once a year. So I had no friends. I had no social network. And that was quite depressing. And in fact, that's almost what led me to start going back to the meetings, because I would sit in my bathroom on a Thursday night and just cry because I missed having a social network. I had no friends. I will say I should preface that, though. I did have one Jehovah's Witness friend who was also fading at that time. But she, had a very busy life and was going through her own stuff. So it was sort of like, we didn't have a lot of time to spend together, and we were both trying to build new lives after leaving. So I don't want to totally discount her, because she actually is my oldest friend. But we have such different lives that we have a hard time connecting to get together. So yeah, I didn't have any friends, and I had to just sort of rebuild, start all over. And one way I did that was when I went back to school. I went back to college.
Did you get your bachelor's degree?
Yes, I got my bachelor's degree in fashion design.
Now, that's unusual, fashion design.
Well, I sort of went back to my childhood dreams of wanting to be a fashion designer and decided why not. There's a school not too far from me that offers that. So I just decided, let me check it out and see if I like it.
Good. That's excellent. And so then when you went to college, you were able to make friends there?
I had a very challenging time making friends. And I made one very good friend, but pretty much everyone else that I went to school with, they were quite a bit younger than me, because I was in my mid-30s, and these were, 18-year-old kids. So they were living a quite different lifestyle of going out and, partying and, living a single life. So I really didn't connect with the people that I went to school with.
I see. That's the same thing that happened to me. I understand. Because you're going back as an adult, and now
Correct.
you got the younger people that's there. There were a few people my age that was going, but for the most part, people were still talking about their parents, wouldn't let them do stuff,
Yeah.
So it was a little different. Yeah. Well, at least you did get a chance to have that experience that most people never get a chance to do because of the organization. Now, let's kind of get into your childhood and, how did you really feel about going to the Kingdom Hall, growing up in this religion?
Well, I can say that my childhood up until about the age of 10 was really idyllic, sort of a Leave It to Beaver kind of family where the father worked and was home usually by 5:30. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and she just really, I have so much respect for the job that my mom did when we were growing up of just staying on top of everything. She was just so scheduled, and she had everything was done. The house was clean. The dinner was on table by 5 o'clock. And so it was sort of an idyllic childhood. I have wonderful memories from that time. We lived in Huntsville, Alabama, and the congregation was very diverse. And we had a lot of friends and there was always activities. But then my father was transferred to where we live now in South Florida, and it was just a completely different story. And pretty much from that point on, meetings and being in this religion was completely miserable. The girls that were in the congregation were so different from what I had been used to living in Alabama. There was just so much gossiping and cliques and backbiting. And I mean, it just was an absolutely miserable time, especially as I got into my teenage years.
That's rocking your foundation.
It certainly did. And, you know, you just dreaded going to the meetings because these girls would stand there and gossip about you right in front of your face. And it was very uncomfortable.
So you actually had a point in your life where you could reference a time when you were in a congregation that was nothing like the one that you're attending now. So basically, when you look back on all of this, if you would have stayed in Huntsville, Alabama, what could have been the chances that you would have remained one of Jehovah's Witnesses?
You know, you can never know where your life would have led you. I would like to think that my critical thinking skills would have kicked in the way that they did in my teenage years, but you know, you never know. I may have still been a Jehovah's Witness had I remained in Huntsville, Alabama. You never know.
Mm-hmm. Because do you know that the average person that I speak to about how they found out this wasn't the truth, it was always for something similar to that. Something negative happened in the congregation that caused them to take another look at what they were a part of. And so for those individuals who happen to be stumbling across this particular episode, and you're sitting in your congregation feeling the way Robin was feeling when she was in Huntsville, Alabama, that everything was great and she loved it, but then when things started getting, you know, kind of rocky in her new congregation, she was able to start to think about what she was in and absolutely found out that this really isn't the truth. So just because things are going well in your congregation doesn't mean that this organization is from God. And I think that's the most important thing is some people, they don't want their world rocked and they don't want to, you know, make any changes. But if you're sitting in this organization and you're not preparing for your future, you're not going to college, you're not making any money, you're not working a job, the system's going to continue to go on. You're going to get older and you're not going to be prepared to take care of yourself later in life. And I think that's the biggest problem that so many Jehovah's Witnesses have. So, Robin, go ahead and finish telling your information about your congregation. How did you feel at 18? I know we talked about this.
Okay. Yeah, when I turned about 18 years old, around that age, well, I would say even prior to that, I was baptized when I was 15. And kind of felt pressured to get baptized because other girls my age were getting baptized. So within a couple of months of that, I really fell into a deep depression, and so much so that I couldn't even handle going to school. I was in 10th grade, and I asked my parents to pull me out and let me homeschool, which I did. And I did that for about 6 months, and I'm a very outgoing person and sort of, you know, got over the depression that I was going through. So I re-enrolled back into public school at that point and finished out high school in public school. Mm-hmm. But upon graduating, just really had no direction because I was raised being told that I would never even graduate from high school. And so now I've graduated. I haven't been preparing to go to college because I was told that that wasn't going to be an option. And so I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. And so I really began thinking about moving away and starting over. And I was sort of making preparations for over a year, you know, tossing the idea back and forth of whether I would, you know, I kind of didn't want to remain a witness. So I was making plans of my escape, essentially. Mm-hmm. So I actually did start going to college at that time. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I was just going to the local community college, taking some classes there. And, but I was very serious about leaving.
What motions did you put in place to leave? Where were you going to go?
I have a non-witness aunt that lives up in Kentucky, and I had already spoken to her about coming to live with her, and she said that I could. I was just so scared, though. I mean, ever since I had gotten baptized, I was terrified of being disfellowshipped and all that would entail, being shunned by my family. So I struggled so much with making that decision. I just couldn't bring myself to take the next step and to leave.
So you just remained at home?
Yeah, so I stayed at home struggling with these thoughts constantly.
Mm-hmm. Well, what was your social life like in the organization? Did you have any boyfriends? Did you date any brothers?
I had a pretty good social life. I've always been pretty outgoing. So, yeah, there were quite a few brothers that I dated very casually through the years, and really kind of started before my parents wanted me to. And, I was outgoing. I liked to be around people, and these brothers liked that kind of personality, that I wasn't like a super serious kind of personality. So it didn't scare them off thinking that I just wanted to get married.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was your first encounter like when you were a friend that you may have been interested in? How did you guys meet?
Yeah. Well, my first boyfriend, I guess you could call boyfriend, was when I was 16. And he was 24, and he was sort of the hot guy in the circuit, the guy that all these young sisters were interested in and wanted to date. And I met him at a party, and he was instantly drawn to me and started calling me right after that. And, of course, my parents said absolutely not. I was too young to be dating, especially to be dating a guy 8 years older than me.
Right.
Yeah, but I sort of, did a little sneaking around so that I could see him. And, he was telling me all the quote-unquote right things, telling me he was falling in love with me, that he wanted to marry me. And so I just really fell for it because he was really charismatic. And come to find out, though, that he was also dating two other sisters that I knew of, one who was actually old enough to be my mother.
No.
She had a son that was my age. Yes, yeah. So I also remembered that he was dating at least one other person who was not a witness. So on top of that, I came to find out that he was a pathological liar. Everything that he told me about his accomplishments and what he had done in life and people that he had met, like celebrities, he was all a lie.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, I mean, I was really blown away when I started to unravel all of his lies. And what ended up happening was he got called into a judicial committee for, I think he had some scam in a business that he was doing. So he was called into a judicial, which he didn't tell me about. But I had found out. I was on to him because other people had started to tell me things. And so what I had ended up doing was, because I knew he would deny that he was having a relationship with me and that he was telling me he wanted to marry me and all these things. So I ended up getting a tape recorder and taping a phone conversation. And I just led him into all of it about what our wedding was going to be like and where we wanted to get married and all the details about that. And so when the elders asked him in that judicial hearing about, what about this girl, Robin? And he says, she's just a friend. And they had already heard the tape recording. So
oh, my goodness.
Like, what? Yeah, so they really, that was a very interesting situation that happened back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it sort of formed my feeling on men and not trusting men because he was my first real relationship.
And so that kind of like made you leery of other brothers that you met?
It did, but unfortunately I did trust other brothers that I met.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so now the brother that's 24 years old, all of that crumbles. How long did you guys date?
Just a few months, like maybe 3 months. But when you're 16 years old, like everything is new and everything is like the biggest thing in life. And you think, it's like, because you have no life experience, it seems so dramatic and so important.
Mm-hmm. But this brother that's 24 years old, you guys didn't go to the same congregation, did you?
No, we hadn't been in the same congregation. I knew who he was because, like I said, all of the sisters in the hall were interested in him, but I had never met him until we met at a party.
Now, at age 24, was he a ministerial servant yet?
No, he wasn't serving. Interestingly,
Okay.
though, he was actually in the same congregation as my husband now, Mike. And Mike says, yeah, I remember him. Everybody thought he was the coolest guy ever. And, all the guys wanted to be him and all the girls wanted to be with him.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, my goodness. And then they finally found him out and then ousted him from the congregation. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, he got disfellowshipped.
Now, what about the other brothers? After him, how long did it take for you to meet someone else?
Well, my next serious relationship, I did wait until I was 18 because, I didn't want to get in trouble with my parents again. But I started dating someone who had been a friend for a very long time, actually one of my best friends. And he was raised as a witness but never baptized. And we began dating when I was 18. And I really, really cared about this person and really thought that I was going to spend my life with him. And we were talking again, talking about getting married. And he even went and got a marriage license because we were talking about eloping.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't think my parents ever knew that. But then I found out that, and again, I had known this person for at least 5 years. And we had been very close friends for that whole time. And so when we started dating, I really trusted him and believed that this was the person I was going to spend my life with. And I found out that he was having sex with one of his coworkers. And, I forgave him. I was kind of stupid. I forgave him and said, I still want to marry you. Let's maybe slow things down and, get your life together. And so we were still dating. And then I found out, someone told me, and I got verified, and then he admitted it, that he was still sleeping with his coworker. So,
oh my goodness.
So we obviously broke up, and that really, really broke my heart. And from that point on, and there were some other guys after that.
Did this brother that you're talking about, that you guys were going to elope, did he ever get baptized?
No.
Okay, so you were baptized at 15, dedicated baptized sister, dating a brother a man that's really not a brother because he's not baptized according to Watchtower standards. And how did your parents feel about that? Oh, that's right, they didn't even know you were planning on marrying him.
Well,
they knew that
they knew that we were dating. They weren't happy about it. He was studying, like I said, he was raised as a witness, and he was studying with an elder and, planning to get baptized.
Okay.
So I mean, he was making the progress to be, to getting baptized. And, he knew, he was raised the same way I was. So he knew, it wasn't like he was just learning the quote unquote truth. Yeah.
Wow. I know a sister in my congregation, in my parents' congregation in Ohio, where this exact same situation happened with the sister that her husband, she ended up marrying this brother, and he was sleeping with a girl on his job. And when the girl found out that he was going to marry this sister, she called the brothers in the congregation to alert them. And he came from a very prominent witness family, and he was even serving as a ministerial servant at the time. But the sister decided that she was going to wait for him to be reinstated, and she married him.
Oh, wow.
And the last I heard, I think they've already appointed him as an elder now. That was many years ago. But I'm just saying, because he was his family was prominent in the organization, so they could sidestep all of those little things that they do for other people. Other people get in trouble in the organization, and they're never appointed ever again. Well, there's some people in the organization, they can do a whole lot of wrongdoing, and in a matter of no time can be, on a Watchtower fast track.
Yep.
Fast track to becoming the next circuit overseer or something like that,
Yeah.
So that's what happened with them. This is like turning into a help the sisters see. You're dating these brothers. Are they really who they say they are? Especially that brother that was really hot, that everybody wanted to be and wanted to be with. You got to realize that when you have these brothers that's 24 years old and not married yet, something's got to be wrong. Because when you really think about it, the brothers in the congregation, they get married young. They don't wait until they're like 30 and 40 years old, like people that are not witnesses. It's all about being able to have sex. That's what I've, throughout the years, being in the organization, it's all about having sex. But this brother, he was already having sex. That's probably why he wasn't married yet. The 24-year-old. And the one that was your age, Yeah. So anyway, so go ahead and tell us about the other friends that you had.
Oh, boy, this is starting to sound like Peyton Place, right? I dated a little bit on, a couple other brothers. I remember there was one who, actually he was a ministerial servant and really on track to becoming an elder because he was already giving public talks. And he just, he glommed onto me and was telling me, of course, all the right things and telling me he wanted me to meet his family, and he was telling his parents all about me, and that he wanted me to meet his friends to meet me. So, again, telling me, but I was already gun shy by this point. So I was sort of, thankfully, I was wary of the things that he was saying because I had been with some of the best charmers that were out there. So it was just the weirdest thing. He ended up, we had plans to go on a date, and he never showed up. And, up until that point, everything had been fine. So I called. This was before cell phones. So I called his house and, no answer, left a message on his answering machine. I was actually really worried about him. He never showed up. A few days later, I tried calling again. And I think that he had his sister answer the phone, his fleshly sister. And she was just like, yeah, he's okay. And I said, well, I was just worried about him. He never showed up. And she was like, yeah, he's fine. I was like, oh, okay. So then I found out about a month later, he was engaged. He got engaged to somebody.
Oh, my
Apparently
goodness.
he was seeing somebody else at that time, and they ended up getting engaged, and I think he ended up marrying her. And, I never saw him again.
That is so crazy. While we're brother bashing, I want to just tell a really quick one here. There was a Bethelite that was at Bethel with my husband, and he ended up in our sister congregation. Because, he had the north side of the congregation and the south congregation, and we were in the north congregation. And this brother was engaged to two different sisters. One of the sisters was from Chicago, and the other sister was from the Northern Virginia area in the Metro D.C. area. And when the sister in Chicago found out he was engaged to two different sisters, she backed out, but he ended up marrying the other sister, and their life was just terrible. He just treated her so bad, but it was crazy.
Yeah.
And I think he got kicked out of Bethel when they found out he was engaged to two different sisters. Engaged. So he wasn't just dating. See, in your situation, he was, that brother that you're talking about, you weren't engaged to him.
No.
But he was engaged to somebody else. What ended up happening with that?
I have no idea. I only found out when I was at another get-together a month after he had stood me up, and I never heard from him again. And I overheard a couple of his friends whispering about me, and I just, confronted them. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, they were like, oh, we're sorry. We didn't know you heard us. And they were like, well, you're the one that he stood up, and, they knew the story kind of from his perspective. And they couldn't believe what he had done.
Oh, that's crazy. No. So he married the sister. Did they stay married, or did you track them, or did you ever run into him and his new wife?
I have no idea. We were not even in the same circuit, so I never saw him again. I never found out what happened to him.
I see. Wow. They probably crashed and burned. that's how I look at people like that. When you operate under those situations, they eventually crash and burn. Because he was probably dating more than one sister too.
Probably.
But I think this is pretty common.
Yeah,
it's pretty common. And everybody that's listening to this story and the program here, Robin's going to make a point in a second, I'm pretty sure, about these people that she's been dating. So, did you date anybody else prior to your meeting your number one man?
I did, but by that point, I was to the point where I didn't want to get married, and I certainly didn't want to. I didn't care to marry a witness by this point, and I was, like I had said, by this point, I was really strongly thinking of my exit plan. And there were a couple of brothers that I was friends with that we kind of casually dated, but they wanted to get more serious, and I just put the brakes on it and said no, thank you. I can see where this kind of life would lead me. And sure enough, both of those brothers are elders now. So I was like, I am not going to go down this road, and I was making an exit strategy. And that's kind of at the time when I met Mike.
Okay, so when you were talking about these brothers, they were serious that you didn't want to get involved in the religion, so you didn't want to be with somebody that was going to be going up the Watchtower fast track. So that's why you didn't want to be bothered?
Absolutely. They were ministerial servants already. They were reaching out. I could see where that life was going to lead, that they would have wanted a wife who was submissive, that was going to, be all the things that the Watchtower says that a wife should be. And I just knew. I could see where that life was going to lead, that was going to lead to them becoming an elder and me being an elder's wife and really being trapped in the organization.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so then after that, you met Mike.
Yes. Mike and I grew up in the same area, so I knew who he was, and he knew who I was, but because we had mutual friends. But when we really started to get to know each other was when his best friend started dating my best friend. So we ended up having to spend a lot of time together because of that, and just started to get to know each other.
Okay. And so then who showed interest in who first?
Well, now I was not looking to get married. I just wanted to do what the Watchtower tells you can't do, and that is casually date. And so I was intrigued by Mike. He was very quiet and sort of mysterious. I came to find out that it was just because he was shy. But I showed interest in him, and he reciprocated and showed the interest back. And it just sort of happened very organically.
Okay. So then because you really weren't seeking to get married or trying to get this relationship off the ground, you were willing to be what people term as friends.
Yeah, I told him from the very beginning that, on one of our first times together, I told him that I didn't want to get married, and I wasn't looking to get married or to be serious. And he, being a guy, he said, yeah, me either. And so our friends were dating, and it just sort of naturally was a, progression because we were attracted to each other that we started casually dating. And, but, again, I was like, I'm not getting married. I'm not serious. But he really had stronger feelings towards me than I expected, and really started to like me a lot and to express that, which really scared me because I didn't want to get tied down. And so it was very bumpy in the beginning. We actually broke up for a couple of months. And, because we had so many mutual friends, we were always seeing each other at get-togethers and things. So we ended up starting to date again, and it was at that point I started to notice that Mike was different than the other guys that I had dated and the other guys I had gotten to know in the organization, that he was honest. He was the first guy that I had met really that was honest, and it blew me away. I was not expecting that at all. So I started to see all of his great qualities, and I just began to fall in love with him.
So, it's amazing how you had to go through all of these brothers in the congregation to find Mike. So can you imagine? There's already no brothers in the organization to begin with. And so a lot of sisters, they don't have anything to choose from. So when you think about it, it's like people may say, oh, well, she finally found somebody that was honest in the organization. But it's pretty bad when you got 5 brothers and 4 of them are no good. You know what I mean?
True. Yeah.
And so the pool of brothers is so slim in the organization. And like when I did one of my other interviews, I said it's like going to the grocery store and it's a snowstorm and there's only one loaf of bread in the store and you just take it because that's the only thing that's there. And that's the same thing that sisters find themselves with when they're trying to find a brother in the organization. There's brothers there. There may be some brothers there, but they're slim picking. And the ones that may be the ones that you may want to be with, they're already married because in the organization, we get married young.
That's so true. That's such a great analogy.
So, how long did you and Mike date before you guys got married?
Well, you know how it is when you're a witness. Things tend to progress pretty quickly. And once we got back together and I started to fall in love with him, seeing all of his wonderful qualities, and he was the first guy that I felt safe with and felt safe to be myself around, and that he actually knew the real me as far as I could, be the real me being a witness. But, he could see that I wasn't going to be, little Miss Betty Crocker, that I was very independent. And I told him from the beginning, I'm not my mom and I'm not your mom. And he was like, I'm okay with that. So we got serious, and within about 3 months, he proposed and I accepted. And then 6 months after that, we were married.
Okay. And then how did things happen with your marriage? How did you settle into your new congregation?
So after we were married, I moved into his congregation. And the first year of marriage, although we didn't fight a lot during the first year of marriage, unlike a lot of couples that I hear about, we actually got along pretty well that first year. So you know how it is the first year that you're married, you're newlyweds. We both, had never lived on our own. So we went from living with our parents to now, owning a home and being married and working full time. So, we didn't have anybody telling us that we had to get up on Sunday morning and go to the meetings. So we actually started to miss quite a few meetings in that first year. And
ooh.
Oh, I know. But shame. Yeah, but it was very tough because his congregation was really cold and just not warm or friendly at all. I didn't feel welcomed into that congregation, and I started struggling again with depression. And in fact, I fell into a pretty serious depression after we had been married for about a year, and ended up, needing to seek professional help for it. And, I got to a point where I just didn't even know what I believed anymore. And the brothers came over for a shepherding call, and I think I shocked the pants off of Mike when I announced to the brothers that I don't know if I even believe in God anymore.
Oh, my goodness.
So I had gotten pretty depressed in a really bad state of mind, and even to the point of having suicidal thoughts. And so I definitely needed professional help, which thankfully Mike really helped me to get that help.
What did the brothers say to you when you made that comment?
It was so funny because they actually looked at me, like they heard that every day. They didn't look surprised at all to hear that.
So they may have had other witnesses that they had shepherding calls on that may have had the same issue or thought that.
I have no idea, but
did they try to read scriptures to you?
No, this has been over 20 years ago, so my memories of all of that are a little hazy, but they were, pretty loving, I would say, and tried to be understanding. But, I think, the brothers, they're just not equipped for this type of situation where someone is clinically depressed. And, they're really not equipped to handle those types of cases.
Did they try to tell you to seek outside help outside from the brothers, from the congregation?
I don't remember them suggesting that. I think I was already doing that, which I'm sure I would have let them know. But
Okay.
I think, I just remember, they did share some scriptures, but I think that they just didn't know what to say to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, because you guys weren't going to the Kingdom Hall at the time and you had been, missing a lot of meetings, did they ever say anything about you need to get back to the Kingdom Hall? Maybe things would get better if you pray more, go out and service more. They didn't give you that same old song and dance that they give everybody else?
I'm sure that was part of the counsel, because you always heard that counsel, whether it be from the platform or in the magazines. But I don't remember specifically that they said that, but I do remember hearing that a lot.
Mm-hmm. And so now let's go ahead and start talking about your escape from Watchtower. And what I mean by escape from Watchtower, I mean the mental escape, because you're not going to the Kingdom Hall, but just because you're not going to the Kingdom Hall doesn't mean that you're not having guilty feelings for not being there. So at what point in your life did you get a chance to start getting that mental anguish out of your head for not going?
Okay. So during that time, I was missing quite a few meetings, but we ended up switching congregations, and things got a little better. And then I became regular again. But after a few years of that, I just was still struggling with not only depression, which I believe my depression had to do with the cognitive dissonance that I was experiencing, that I didn't fully believe that this was the truth. And so around 11 years ago or so, 11, 12 years ago, I just sort of got to a point where, I was regular at the meetings and everything, but I just decided that I am not going to suppress these doubts anymore. I'm going to allow myself I wasn't doing any research as far as like what would be considered apostate or anything like that, but I started attending classes again at the community college and just getting, some general education classes out of the way. And I just kind of allowed myself to start thinking about different things and different ideas and whether the Bible was literal or if it was, more figurative. And I really started to wake up and realize that most of the things that were being taught were not true. And I found it very hard, especially when they talked from a scientific point of view from the platform, to sit there and listen to information that I knew wasn't true. So At that point, Mike was not going to meetings because he was sort of, I guess some would call it, stumbled by the elders from something that happened to him. So I was still going to meetings for about a year during all of this. And I just finally decided, what am I doing? I'm coming by myself. I don't believe what's being preached from the platform. Why am I doing this to myself? So I just, I just made the decision, and I never went back from that decision. But I just made a decision. I'm not going to do this anymore. It's not healthy for me emotionally, mentally, and I just can't do this anymore.
And at that point, you really didn't have any confirmation that this wasn't the truth?
No, I had no confirmation other than my internal gut feeling about it. And since I wasn't going to the meetings anymore, and I just decided I'm not going to be a witness anymore, I just can't do this, I had no interest in, disassociating myself, because I knew what that would mean. I knew that my family wouldn't be talking to me at all. And at this point, I had, no social network, because now, the friends in the congregation I wasn't associating with. So I couldn't handle that at that point. I couldn't handle losing my family as well. But so I just decided, all the things that I have questions about, that I've been afraid, because you're afraid as a witness to look at apostate material. I remember the first time I clicked onto what would be considered an apostate site, that I was like shaking and nervous about it. And I'm like, nobody can even see me. I'm anonymous. Nobody knows who I am.
Right.
Yeah. So
and do you remember what site that was that you went to?
I went on I think it was Jehovah'sWitnesses.net. It was the forum. I didn't write a single thing. I just read all of the conversations. And, there's topics that you can look up. And so, people had done a lot of research. And so I started reading those topics. And I believe JW Facts was already up. That website was already up. Because I know I went onto a website that talked about that they had belonged to the UN, and so I researched that, and then the 607 information, and I researched that, and so, just a whole bunch of different things, and I also read the book Crisis of Conscience at that time. Mm-hmm. So I just was like sort of binging on all of this information, but couldn't share it with Mike because he just wasn't ready for it, and when I did mention that I had gone on to the Jehovah'sWitness.net forum, he got really upset. And he was like, why are you looking at that? That's apostate. And I said, what do you care? You haven't been to a meeting in 2 years.
Amazing.
I don't know. It just makes me nervous. I don't know why.
Now, isn't that something how he said that? Because, here he is, because you're thinking, oh, he's not really interested in this, blah, blah, blah. He's over here. He's doing what he wants to do. No meetings, no interaction with any Jehovah's Witnesses. But the moment you start talking about, oh, I'm going to a site to verify that this is not the truth, or I'm talking to people that used to belong and they're telling their story, now all of a sudden those sites are demonized. They're off limits. So, Robin, you see we have a lot of work to do from your own personal experience, right? That all these people listening to our site, listening to this program right now, they're no doubt feeling like you all felt or like Mike felt,
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid of it.
Yeah, and I try to keep that in mind when people are commenting on our videos, people that don't like what we're saying and what we're doing. I've gotten into conversations with people who were some of the biggest haters, and finally they would admit that they were disfellowshipped, or inactive. And, so that's how I know that some of the people that make the nastiest comments are in that position. And It's interesting, too, that I remember right before I allowed myself to wake up and I allowed myself to stop suppressing, I was pioneering. I was auxiliary pioneering for like 3 months. And I got super zealous and was, really, because Mike had stopped going to the meetings, so I got like super zealous and I don't know, maybe even a little self-righteous.
Oh my God!
That is, you have to admit that, like, because it's so painful to wake up and you're fighting it tooth and nail, and I think, and that's why I don't get mad at these people who are so angry and vicious with us, because I think maybe they're in the same situation I was, that they're really fighting the waking up process, and they're lashing out at us because they're in so much pain.
Well, JT always tells them, we're so glad that you're here, because, that he knows that they're not supposed to be there. And he said that's just you're just one step in the right direction of getting out of the organization, because the fact that you're here and giving us an audience, it's like you're not supposed to be here, so obviously you're doing something right because you're not listening to the society. And so he just pours on the charm, and they just get so mad at him because he said don't fight with them. He said don't cuss at them, don't say bad things to them. He said because Jehovah's Witnesses, that's what they're looking for you to do. So they can say, see, they're out here trying to say we're not the truth, but look at how they talk to me. Look how they're saying all these bad things about me. And so he said he just pours on the charm, and they just can't stand that, because they'll be out.
I love that approach. It's sometimes easier said than done, because I've found myself getting upset with people, but I do try to keep that in mind. And I kind of just had that realization in the past week, knowing that I was going to have this interview with you and remembering where I was at that time in my life right before I woke up. that I got, because Mike wasn't coming to meetings, and so I was feeling a little self-righteous, towards him, and upset that I wasn't getting the spiritual support, and he was supposed to be my spiritual head. And so I just got really, zealous and pioneered for 3 months. And
wow, that must have put a pretty big strain on your marriage at the time. Did Mike just decided that he wasn't going to go to the meetings? You said he had something going on with the elders, right?
Yeah, he was very active in playing paintball, and he was on a team and actually played at like a semi-pro level, and so he still plays, but he was getting very serious, and the first thing in his life that he actually felt very passionate about, and it was the most fun he'd ever had in his whole life. So he was very involved with that, and the elders just really gave him a hard time. They wanted him to quit. And he tried to provide them with information about paintball that was accurate, because there was one article in an Awake from 1988, I believe, that was very inaccurate about the sport and just full of falsehoods. And so he just wanted to show them the actual facts. And he got together like a whole dossier of information with statistics and all the facts about the sport. And they just held up their hand and said, "We're not going to look at it. You just need to quit." And so he was very angry and said, "Screw them. I'm not going back. They won't even listen to me. They didn't want to talk to me. They just wanted to tell me to stop playing." And it wasn't a conversation. They were just telling me what to do. And I'm tired of them telling me how to live my life. And so he just decided, I'm not going back to the meetings. And I was like, all right, what am I going to say?
But how did he react? So like you're saying, when you started going up on the forum, Jehovah'sWitnesses.net, then he said, "Oh, you got to get off the site." So, he's not even thinking about how the brothers treated him, and now you're doing something against the organization, but he's telling you, oh, you can't do that. So he's not even thinking like that.
Well, Mike is smart enough to know not to tell me not to do something. So he just...
That's like, 'cause you're no Betty Crocker here, girl. That's right.
Yeah, he was just kind of freaked out by it. He's like, "Why are you looking at these sites? This is scary."
Right. But he was trying to discourage you or scare you or whatever, to get off the site.
I realized at that point that he wasn't ready for the information, and so I just kept it to myself and decided, maybe he'll wake up one day, maybe not, doesn't matter. He's not going to meetings anyways, and he's not going to try to get me to go back. So, so I just dropped it at that point.
It's interesting that you say that, because all the people that I have been talking to in the past couple of years, or even past 20 years for that matter, whenever they find out information about this not being the truth, they immediately want to shove it down the throats of their family to the point that they start to alienate people from them. So do you agree that what you did was a good thing?
Oh, yes, it was a good thing for me to drop it and not try to shove it down his throat. I certainly wasn't going to share that information either with my family. I wasn't one of these people that wanted to share, because I had read all these horror stories of people being disfellowshipped for apostasy when they weren't sharing the information, but merely someone knew that they didn't agree with something, and the brother said, unless that they would basically recant from what they said that they believed. And they were like, well, I won't share it with anybody, but I can't say that I, agree with the Watchtower. And just because they wouldn't say that they agreed with the Watchtower, they were still disfellowshipped for apostasy. So I wasn't about to run that risk with anyone, and I kept what I had learned. For the most part, I kept it to myself.
Which kind of helped you out a lot. It bought you some time to, get yourself acclimated to your new environment, to your new life, to realizing that this wasn't the truth, knowing that you had to now build a new clientele of friends and begin to live the normal life that you always wanted to live. So how long did it take before Mike joined you in the thought of this not being the truth?
In 2007, we had the opportunity to travel to Egypt. And after that trip, Mike became very interested in the artwork and architecture and all of that of ancient civilizations. So we would go to the library quite often, and he started checking out books and about, art and everything. And he came across a passage that talked about, it was Babylonian art, and it was about the destruction of Jerusalem. And it said 585, 586. And he was like, that's interesting. Why do they say that? So he got another book and another book and another book. And all of them said the same thing. He couldn't find any verification that Jerusalem was destroyed in 607, as the Watchtower says. So he was like, wow. And so, he went online and Googled it and, did a little bit more research. And from that point on, he realized, he goes, if they have this wrong, and this is like a pivotal date in their doctrine as to how they arrive at 1914, he said, then that means the whole thing is false. So he's very black and white, and he was like, if this one main thing is wrong, then it's all wrong, and none of it's true. I don't have to worry about Armageddon. I don't have to worry about being destroyed. So that was how he basically woke up.
So in years, would you say it was 2, 3, 4 years before or after you made your discovery that he learned it?
It was about 2 to 3 years after I had woken up, yeah.
So that must have been really hard for you to be able to, be on the internet learning all this stuff that you're learning about the organization, and your husband not realizing the same thing that you know, and you are just silent, not saying anything. What type of social life did you have while you were waiting for your husband to wake up?
Well, I had begun going to college full time. That's when I enrolled for the fashion design program. So essentially, I had no social life because I was a full time student and I worked part time. So there was no social life.
Yeah. Did you have any contact with your family?
I did. In the first couple of years after I left, was very rocky with my family. They were very uncomfortable around me, and the phone calls stopped. And I just made it a point, though, that once a week I would, no matter what, would stop by to see my parents because they only live 5 minutes from me. And so I made that my habit, which continued pretty much up until this year, that when they're in Florida, which they're here for most of the year, I would stop by to see them and just to try to maintain a relationship with them.
So now, what is your standing in the congregation now?
Well, it's interesting because once our YouTube videos were discovered, of course, the elders were alerted down here, and Mike had received a phone call from an elder who left a message saying that he'd like to get together and, talk, right? Mm-hmm. So we're not going to do that, and we just made the decision that we would make a disassociation video. And so we read a statement of our intention to disassociate ourselves and some of the reasons why. And we put that up, obviously on YouTube and on our website. And I don't know that it's ever been announced to the congregation. I have one tie to somebody who is kind of connected to someone in that congregation. And they said, as far as they know, it's never been announced. Mm-hmm. So as far as we're concerned, we have disassociated ourselves. But as far as they're concerned, I don't know that it's ever been announced.
So when you think about, what you're doing online and, the things that you learned throughout the years, what type of advice would you give to someone who's in a similar situation that you were in? What would you tell them to somebody who's actually trying to fade or get out of the organization?
Well, I would definitely advise them to not do it the way that I did it 10 years ago, because I just stopped going and lost all my social network without having another one in place. So I would advise them to start building a network outside of the organizations to start getting friends outside of the organization. Everybody's circumstances are different, but one way that you can do nowadays, of course, is there's so much available now as far as like Meetup online where you can find people with a similar hobby or interest, and you can just start meeting people that way. But I definitely encourage people to start building a social network outside of it, because we are so isolated as witnesses to the outside world. Even if we have jobs or go to school, we don't associate with those people. And we also have like a mental block towards them as far as developing any relationships that are more than just as acquaintances. So I definitely encourage people to start building that network, getting friends, joining the Facebook recovery groups that are available for ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, going on forums. They need to be able to talk to other people who understand what they're going through. And so don't isolate yourself. That will lead to a lot of depression and makes it a lot tougher. And it also makes it harder to make the final breakaway. And I myself almost went back just because I felt so lonely.
Wow. Even though you know it wasn't the truth?
Yeah.
This is even after you read Jehovah'sWitness.net?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think that's the goal of the organization anyway, is to isolate you so much that you have no choice but to go back.
Yeah.
It's like a person getting out of prison. Haven't you heard about people who get out of prison and they're released? They can't get jobs because they have a felony on their record, and the family won't really help them because they don't want the element around them that was in prison. And so a lot of people will commit crimes just to go back to prison.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. And being in the organization is like being in prison.
Yep, it certainly is. It's so interesting to see the comparison, and how similar the psychological aspect of that is.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like to share with the audience for the women that are struggling out here trying to figure out what's their next move?
I'm no expert, but...
Yes, you are. You're an expert because you lived it. I always find it interesting. Who's better equipped at this, a person that's lived the experience or someone that has sat in a classroom and learned the theory,
Yeah, it's true. You're right.
We live in a credential-driven society, and I learned that really quickly. Yeah, I learned it really quickly when I was going to college, and I was like, everyone wants to know what school you went to. When JT gave his mother's retirement speech, when she retired, and her coworkers asked her, what school did your son graduate from? And this is before we were still witnesses at the time, right? So everybody wants to know what your credentials are. But they don't realize that you don't need credentials to understand and know certain things because, learning is universal. It's not just in a classroom, And I think that's what we kind of fail to realize. But, yeah. Well, any advice to women and how they're treated by their husbands in terms of headship and all that stuff?
Well, I was never the type to sort of follow the rules of the type of wife that the Watchtower tells you to be. I was always very independent, and I didn't follow the same thinking as the Watchtower about how to be a submissive wife. Because, I feel like this is a partnership, and that I'm an equal in this partnership, and that we have to make decisions together, and that it's not unilateral. So I'm not sure what advice I would give to witness women. Because everybody's situation is different, and everybody's personalities are different. Other than you are worthy of respect, you are worthy to be treated as an equal, that nobody should feel that they are superior to you or have authority over you. And, you can have respect for your husband and still be an equal to him.
Right. I think that's the key, because when you said that it's not about being a submissive wife, you got to ask yourself, what does that mean? Because if you're not submissive the way Watchtower says, it just means that you don't question. And I think that was the biggest thing I enjoyed about leaving the organization, was that when JT and I would be in a conversation with friends, and we would be not really having a debate, as it were, but we would be having a discussion. And in the discussion, I didn't have to look at him as the final word in what I was going to believe, as the outcome of our discussion. So I could find myself on the opposite side of what he thought. But in the organization, you couldn't do that because you were looked at as being a person that was, overstepping your bounds. And I'm talking about just everyday stuff. Like, I don't want to go to that movie. I don't want to go to that restaurant. I don't want to go, but you just go anyway because your husband said let's go, You
know what's funny about that is that I never cared what anybody thought of me as a wife. And before we were even married, someone said to Mike, well, I know who's going to wear the pants in that family.
Oh, no. You're kidding me.
No.
Oh, my God.
I always spoke my mind and I made no apology for myself. I'm like, I am an intelligent woman and I have my own thoughts about things, and it's okay for me to believe what I believe. And I remember one brother accusing me of being a man hater because of that. Yeah, and I said, I'm not a man hater, but I just don't think that because you have a penis that you are superior to me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I don't know if it was you that we were having a conversation, but it was somebody else or whatever. But they said that they thought that, we always grew up in with this idea that the brothers were so smart. But somebody I was talking to said they thought the sisters were smarter than the brothers, when it came to making decisions or, looking at things in a rational way. And sometimes
I definitely
the brothers would
believe
say
that.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember being out in service with this one brother. He was a brother in our car. He was a presiding overseer at the time. And we were out in field service. And me, the presiding overseer, another brother, and this other sister was a good friend of mine. And it was really cold outside. And they didn't want to have to keep taking off their glove to write down the knotted homes. And so they said, we're going to have these sisters keep these knotted homes. And so they were trying to tell us what the numbers to their houses were that were knotted homes, and they wanted us to keep track of their knotted homes because we were sisters, and that was the order that they had given us, that we had to do this because we were supposed to be submissive to the brothers taking the lead. Mm-hmm. And this was during the time when I was getting ready to leave. JT and I were already having our doubts, and we were about to leave. And every time the brother would give me the number that was a knotted home for him, I just refused to write it down on a slip of paper. And then when I gave him my knotted homes for that morning, I gave him all the ones that we had minus his. I don't even know if he even realized it, but I didn't even write his down. Because I was kind of done. I mean, because we were already on the internet at the time, and we knew this wasn't the truth, and we were just going through the motions at that point. So yeah, that was funny.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's so many stories like that. Like, I think I've blocked out a lot of that stuff that happened. I mean, there's certain stories that stand out in my mind, but I just was always an eye roller at all of that nonsense about, the men taking, being the head and everything. And so I just kind of blocked it out. I didn't even listen to it because it was just ridiculous to me.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say you have a sister, so, basically what was her life like? Was she, just briefly, did she have the same attitude towards men that you did?
She does not have the same ideas as I did as far as the whole submission. And my sister is like a more serious type personality. So, no, she didn't really feel the same way that I did about that. But I think a lot of that changed once she was actually married.
Okay. Because I was just wondering, I was trying to find out if because you guys came from a Leave It to Beaver kind of environment, could that have been the reason why you saw that up close and personal? Did that have something to do with the way you felt?
Yes. I have a lot of respect for my mother, and, I really think that it's owed to her that my parents had such a happy marriage, or still have such a happy marriage, because she is, she's just a very mild person, and she just does. She just does whatever is asked of her by my father. She just, without questioning, she just always has done what needed to be done as far as, as a mother and wife. And, but on the flip side of that, it really bothers me seeing in a way, a lack of respect when she's been cleaning and cooking all day long, and my father, is sitting on the couch watching TV and hollers across the house for her, if she'll go get him something to drink. Mm-hmm. And, that just always bothered me. Yeah, I understand, maybe he's been working as well, but my mom worked very hard around the house and took care of everything so that my dad could focus on just, working at his job and being an elder, So I always felt that an inequity there. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that I was not going to be that way if I ever got married.
I think a lot of women see that. And sometimes it's probably the era that your parents grew up in, that women were like the Ozzie and Harriet kind of thing. Women didn't work, so the men went out the house and worked. So they worked a lot. My mother was the same way. We were in the same kind of a household. So I do understand what you're saying. I wanted my own career, though.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom,
Yeah.
But so I totally get that. I totally agree. As well as all of our listening audience and the women who are being empowered by this conversation. But anyway, I really have enjoyed having this discussion. For individuals that want to know more about Robin and Mike, be sure to check out their YouTube channel on What's Up Watchtower, and their website is whatsupwatchtower.com. And because Mike was just so creative, if you want to email them, you can email them at whatsupwatchtower@gmail.com. I love Mike's creativity there.
Me too.
Right. So be sure to check out their channel. I mean, they're on a fast track on YouTube. They have a lot of interesting videos that people can listen to and get information about how to find out the truth about the truth. So, Robin, thank you so much for sharing your voice with the many women that are being on this program to help other women to empower themselves. And this has been Lady C.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been so much fun talking to you, and I've just really enjoyed it, and I hope we talk again soon.
Absolutely. We'll have to get together and do some team up to do some projects together for the women empowerment.
Sounds great.
Women's Empowerment Conference.
I am always for empowering women.
Absolutely.
If you've been in the struggle and want to appear as a guest on our show, email us at exjwct@gmail.com. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of critical thinkers.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.